Morning, everyone. Andrew with Defiant Tactical Accessories, and I want to talk for a moment about something that's been on my mind. And this is just a random dude on the internet rambling, right? So just, I guess, take it with a grain of salt. And that is speed reloads, magazine changes. Now, I know that most of my other videos have been focused on gear that we're considering carrying and sort of reviews on those sorts of topics, but personally, for the last couple of decades, I have been involved in firearm training one way or the other as a student. Right, I'm not an instructor, and so I've been doing that long enough that I think that I'm qualified to have an opinion. I have generated an educated opinion on a lot of different topics, and I don't know why this popped into my mind. But you know, there are a lot of schools that teach a particular technique for speed reloads or emergency reloads, whichever you want to call them, that I disagree with, and it's for what I think is a good reason. And so I have a different technique that I like to use. Um, you know, so the technique that I'm referring to, okay, and in fact, I have a firearm with me here to demonstrate. Let's go ahead and show. It has an empty magazine and an empty chamber because I know somebody's going to have something to say about it. Okay. The technique that is often demonstrated, or that a lot of instructors seem to approve of, is, at slide lock, right? It's, oh shit, I need to change magazine because I'm still in the fight and my gun's at slide lock, right? You identify that you have an empty chamber, right? And then you reach for your new magazine. And as you do so, you press the magazine release, and that magazine's supposed to fall out. And then you bring the new magazine in, and then you run the slide, and off you go. Back to work, right? Well, I disagree strongly with that technique. Okay? So I understand that people like to get very pedantic, maybe, or like to plant their flag on a hill and say, damn it, this is the right way and that's the wrong way. And I hate to be that guy. I don't think oftentimes sorry, I have a little something on my nose here. I don't think that's often the right way to look at things, right? I typically look at things as tools in my toolbox, right? And whether that's a stance like Weaver versus isosceles, or modified Weaver, right? I look at those as tools, right? Those are just different tools in my toolbox for how to get the job done. Same with flashlight technique, right? And any number of other things. And I think becoming pedantic along those lines, or sighting, right? Point shooting versus sighted fire and that sort of thing. I think that those are just tools in the toolbox, and becoming pedantic and religious about something is silly. But this is not one of those cases to me. So, let's start first with, I want to talk first about the problems with that technique, okay? And let's go ahead and bring the weapon to bear and get me to slide lock. Okay, so I'm at slide lock, right? What do I know, first of all, about my gunfight here? Because remember, we're focused on gunfighting, not on anything else. Gunfighting. What do I know about my gunfight at this point? Well, I know right now that I've had a pretty bad day, right? If you follow John from Active Self-Protection, you'll know that the majority of self-defense shootings in the United States don't involve going through a magazine change. So I've had one of two things happen to me here. I'm no longer shooting because my weapon is not functioning, right? One is I'm at slide lock, which means I've gone through a full magazine in a gunfight, which is not great. Or number two, and if I'm doing an emergency reload, I'm still in the fight, right? There's still a fight. I am at slide lock. Or number two, I've had a stoppage in the middle of a gunfight. Okay, either of those are not good situations. So whatever technique I use to get a new magazine into this weapon needs to prioritize two things in my mind. One, is speed. I have to get a new magazine into this weapon right now. I don't have time to fiddle. I don't have time to mess around. It needs a new magazine in there. Number two, it needs to guarantee that a new mag gets in. Because while a slow technique is slow, okay, a fast technique that you have to do twice because you fumble the first time is even slower, right? And so, to that end, people typically lean towards the speed reload technique that I just mentioned earlier, right? So they're going to drop the magazine and they think that they're saving time, and perhaps they are to a degree over some other technique, maybe even the technique I prefer, by pressing the magazine release for the magazine to fall free, and as it's falling, grabbing a new magazine to bring it into the magazine well. Okay, so that may be reasonably fast. But you know what it's not is reliable. Okay? So there are a number of reasons why a magazine may not fall free from your magazine well. All right? It could be that there is a malfunction in the magazine itself that is causing it to bind up on the inside of the magazine. It could actually, setting aside something going wrong, some magazines just bind. Okay, not all magazines fall free. Now, I personally have magazines. I don't have any here with me right now that actually kind of there's some friction on the inside of the magazine well, and those magazines won't just fall free. They'll fall free if they're full or partially full, but they don't reliably always fall free. Okay. Again, setting aside a malfunction, you may not be in a position where they're going to fall free. That works great if you're standing on a square, on a clean range. You're standing and delivering, right? You got your good isosceles position or whatever you're shooting. But when you start working around obstacles, right? You might be coming into the side here like that. If you're laying down on the ground, right, shooting under a vehicle, if you happen to be in a compressed position, obviously wouldn't be reloading from here, but if you're compressed, if you're in a fight, if you're bound up for some reason, you might be in a position where you're not going to be able to rely on gravity doing that work for you, right? You're relinquishing control of whether or not the magazine comes out to gravity, okay? And so the magazine may just have a little friction, number one. Number two, you might not be in a position where it's going to just fall out, okay? And then you take into account actual malfunctions, right? There are malfunctions where if something happens, like, I don't know, the magazine, the feed lips or whatever swell or whatever because you haven't been taking good care of your magazines or whatever, or paying attention or shooting enough with your carry mags, and you go to use it and you find out that they're kind of stuck. Well, that's a shitty time to find that out, but it would be even shittier if you fumble a magazine reload and get killed, right? Or you have a malfunction like a double feed, right? Like a failure to extract, and with a failure to extract, right? I can push this all day long. I've got it set up. That's not coming out, okay? Any number of other reasons where for whatever reason, the magazine, it just isn't going to come out. Okay. Now, if you're thinking, and you may be thinking that, yeah, but we don't use the same technique to handle some of those situations. That's true. Like, we have a specific technique for handling malfunctions. That's true. But I would argue that a lot of those techniques implement the same procedures. All right. So, for example, here's the thing. If I'm going to do a magazine speed reload, right? The basic movement is removing my support hand, okay? And I have to retrieve a magazine and insert it and then run the slide, okay? So it's this movement, right? if I have to handle a type 1 malfunction, just a failure to fire, what is the movement? It's the same movement, right? If I have to handle a type 2 stovepipe, what is the movement? It's the same movement. If I have to handle a type 3 failure to extract, what is the movement? It's the same movement, right? It should be anyhow. So remember, with a failure to extract, what happens? I have my double feed, my failure to extract, okay? The movement is, now, you can add the step of locking the slide back. In fact, the first gun school I went to, that's what I was taught. You don't have to, though, right? So you can lock the slide back, okay, which is obviously additional. So I'll even go with that. I'll lock the slide back. And now what is it? It's the same movement. Grab a magazine and put it in. You see? Okay, so all of those things have the same movements. Now, you don't have to do that for double feed. I'll demonstrate right now. I just released the slide. I have another double feed set up. I can press the release, strip the magazine out, right? And then I would grab my new one that was here, and then I would work the slide to put in a new round. So, or I could rack the slide multiple times before putting in the new magazine. The point is, they all have common movements. That is, the procedure for each and every one of those techniques is built around a similar task, or in some cases the same task, the same movements. If we have multiple procedures built around similar movements that are similar but not quite the same, we have a problem. And the reason for that is that now we have added decision points for ourselves in the midst of obviously a very stressful confrontation here, right? And we have to develop, say, 3 or 4 different very similar muscle memory tasks. All right? And that's not optimal. We want where we can simplify and use a common task for all of those techniques. We want to do that because it allows us to simplify our skill set and simplify the decision matrix in the midst of a confrontation. All right. So overall, okay, the reason that I do not like the technique, the speed reload, emergency reload technique that relies on, going back to that, sorry, I almost forgot. There's a couple of other tasks that are very similar, right? There's the tactical reload, right? Tactical reload is conducted where you retain the magazine in the weapon and you insert a new magazine. Guess what the movement is there, right? So I'm going to release and remove the magazine, stow it, grab a new one, and insert it. That's tactical reload. That's another one of those techniques that has a similar procedure, right? Okay. Overall, just to recap, the problems that I have with the speed or emergency reload technique that I described, where we rely on gravity to drop the magazine while we try to also index and insert a new magazine, is that I am relinquishing control over a critical task that has to be done at a critical point in time. And that is not okay. I want fast, but I also want definitive. I want to know for sure that magazine comes out. And I want to know for sure that a new magazine has gone in. And I want to know for sure that a new round has been chambered. And I don't want to rely on anything else, or as few other things as I possibly can, to ensure that actually happens. And I also want the way that I do that to be common with other tasks that I already have to perform. That way I know when I perform them, I'm only developing muscle memory for one type of task. Okay? So, now, as to how I do a magazine change, and this is, probably almost 15 minutes of speaking about something you're going to be like, well, that's not a huge difference or whatever. This is how I do it, okay? So, I'm sitting on an empty chamber, all right? Give me just a moment. Okay, I've already got one in here. Okay, I'm sitting on an empty chamber, all right? So I can no longer shoot, right? For whatever reason, my gun has just stopped. I'm going to bring it into my workspace, okay, and I see whatever the problem is. Honestly, I prefer a minimal diagnostic approach. Gabe Suarez at Suarez International teaches a very minimally diagnostic approach to getting a gun back up and running. All right, but that nevertheless, bring it into my workspace and I can see what's going on. Okay, I'm going to press the magazine release, and I'm not just going to let it fall because I don't know. In fact, look, that one didn't even on the first try. All right, I pushed it; it didn't go anywhere. Okay, I'm going to press the magazine release. My hand's already here. Okay, I don't lose anything by doing this. Okay, I'm going to put my hand around the base of the magazine, press the release, and pull. All right, my hand is, I've had people ask me, say, well, that's slower, it's unnecessary. Well, my hand's literally already here. Like, I'm not losing anything here. Okay, so I'm going to press the magazine release, grab, pull, and I'm just going to throw this thing. Like, I don't even care. My hand is already going this way anyhow, right? I'm going to make this movement because I'm going to come down and go to my magazine, right? That's where I'm going anyhow. I'm going to pull this thing out. I'm just going to chuck it. I don't even care about this thing anymore. It's just an impediment to me saving my life. So I'm going to press the magazine release, throw it. And if you're standing up, that can, well, all right. So what you're going to see here is I'm going to throw it, right? And I'm already back up into the gun. Okay. It's a very similar movement to what you would expect. All right. So I'm not losing anything really, in my opinion. All right. Perhaps it's a little bit slower, but I'm not a gun gamer, and I don't care about a tenth of a second. Okay. So I'm going to come in, throw it, put in a new one, and then I'm going to rack the slide. Okay. So that's the technique that I like to go with. That's the technique that I like to use. All right. So just like that, and then I'm back in the fight. All right. So I'm not going to sit here and rely on anything other than my hand like ripping that magazine out of the gun. Yeah, I'm not going to rely on anything else to get it out. It's just me pulling the magazine out. And it's going to come out whether it likes to or not. And that technique will work whether I've got a double feed, a stovepipe, and I have to, for whatever reason, I end up having to change the magazine, failure to fire, and I have to change the magazine. A speed reload and I have to change the magazine. It's the same thing I have to do for a tactical reload, except I don't chuck the mag, right? I retain it. It's the exact same motion. It's the same thing. And it gives me more control over what happens with the magazine. It ensures that old magazine gets out. Okay? Under duress, I may not notice that I have a malfunction. Under duress, I may not notice that there's a problem with the magazine. And, if I've feed lips have I don't know, melted or whatever, and now I've got a mess inside of my chamber. Well, guess what? That thing's coming out, right? Unless it's like melted to the to the inside of the magazine well, it's coming out. That is the way I like to do my magazine changes. If you have a different technique or thoughts on that, or suggestions on something that might work better, or why I'm wrong, throw a comment down below and let's talk about it. I'm typically, like I said, not the guy to be super pedantic about things, but I am in this case. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say.